The sun was falling behind the hills, painting the sky with orange and purple light. On the edge of the frontier, far away from cities and trade routes, an old wooden ranch stood in silence. The man who lived there was a retired human soldier. His hair had turned gray, and his face was lined with scars and years of war. He had chosen this place because he wanted nothing but quiet. No neighbors, no noise, no memories of the battlefield. Only silence. Each day was the same for him. He woke up early, fed the animals, repaired fences, and drank water from the well. He cooked simple meals, sat by the porch, and listened to the wind passing through the dry grass. The sound of silence was his only companion. He had fought enough battles in his life, buried too many friends, and carried too many ghosts in his heart. Out here, no one asked him for help. No one demanded he be a hero. And that was what he wanted. Peace. But peace was fragile. He knew it deep inside. Sometimes, when he sat on his porch at night, he would stare at the stars and remember the wars between humans and aliens. The bloodshed had not ended, only moved elsewhere. He had left it all behind, but he feared one day trouble would come knocking. Still, he pushed those thoughts away and tried to believe the silence would last forever. That evening, as he sharpened his old knife near the fire, he heard something unusual. His ears, trained by years of war, caught the faint sound of movement beyond the fence. At first, he thought it was just an animal, but then came whispers, soft, trembling voices carried by the wind. His hand froze, the knife glinting in the firelight. He had not heard voices near his ranch in years. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his back straight despite his age. He reached for the old rifle hanging by the door. It was polished, ready, though he had hoped never to use it again. He stepped outside, his boots crunching against the dry earth. The night was quiet, too quiet, except for those whispers. He walked to the gate and stopped, his rifle held steady. Who's there? His voice was deep, steady, but the silence that followed made his heart beat harder. Then shadows appeared from the darkness. Figures, one after another, stepping into the dim moonlight. 11 of them. Women, their faces covered with dust and pain, their clothes torn from travel. They were aliens, their skin pale with strange markings, their eyes glowing faintly in the night. Each of them looked exhausted, some leaning on others for strength. Their leader, tall and thin, stepped forward and raised her hands to show she had no weapon. Human, her voice cracked with fear and pleading, "Please, we need shelter." He stiffened, his grip on the rifle tightening. Aliens, the same kind he had once fought on battlefields, the same kind who had killed his comrades. Memories struck him like fire, but he pushed them down. He noticed then that they were all women, and not just women, widows. Around their necks hung small pendants, the kind their people wore to honor fallen husbands. Some clutched children's belongings, small shoes, a doll, a scarf, though no children were with them. The human studied them in silence. His mind told him to close the gate, to send them away. This was not his problem. He had come here for peace, not for strangers. Yet something in their eyes stopped him. Desperation, fear. They had traveled far, and this was their last hope. One of the younger widows stepped forward, tears streaking her dirt-covered face. "We have nowhere else to go," she whispered. "Our colony was destroyed. Our men are gone. We are hunted." The soldier's jaw tightened. He did not want to care. He had promised himself never to be drawn into another fight. But as he looked at their thin frames, their trembling hands, he remembered the faces of his own family long gone. He remembered what it was like to be helpless, to need someone, anyone. He lowered the rifle slightly, though his eyes stayed sharp. "You can rest here tonight," he said coldly. "But only tonight." Relief swept across their faces like a wave. Some fell to their knees, whispering thanks in their strange tongue. The leader bowed her head deeply, her voice breaking. "You may have saved our lives, human." He opened the gate slowly, his heart heavy with unease. As they passed him, he caught the smell of dust, smoke, and sorrow. 11 widows entered his silent ranch, their footsteps echoing in the night. Inside, the rooms that had been quiet for so long were suddenly filled with whispers, with the sound of tired breaths, with the creak of floorboards under many feet. The human sat in his chair by the fire, rifle still in his hands, listening. The silence he loved so much was gone, replaced by voices of strangers. He told himself it was only for one night. By morning, they would leave, and his life would return to what it was. But deep in his chest, he felt something he had not felt in years, an unease that came not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying with it faint lights from the hills. The soldier narrowed his eyes, realizing the widows had not been lying. They were being hunted. Trouble had followed them, and now it was on his land. He leaned back slowly, staring into the flames. Silence was gone. His life had just changed, and he knew there was no turning back. The night passed slowly. The widows slept in corners of the ranch house, some on the floor, some leaning against walls. They were too tired to speak much, their breathing heavy with exhaustion. The human sat by the fire all night, his rifle resting on his knees. He did not sleep. His eyes remained sharp, watching the flames, listening to every sound outside. His house, once silent, now carried the soft murmurs of strangers, and he felt the weight of it pressing down on him. When the morning light crept through the windows, the widows stirred. They looked uneasy, as if afraid he would order them out at once. He stood and cleared his throat, his voice steady but firm. "I said one night," he reminded them. His words struck them like a blade, and several lowered their heads, ready to be turned away. The leader, her voice shaking but steady enough to be heard, stepped forward. "Please, human," she said, her alien accent curling around the words. "We will leave if you wish, but you must understand. We have nowhere to go. Our homes are gone. Our people call us cursed. Without shelter, we will die." Her words cut deeper than he expected. He turned his face away, unwilling to meet their eyes. He had seen death many times, but he had always told himself that this place, his ranch, was far away from it. Yet now, death stood at his gate, dressed as widows begging for mercy. He walked outside, needing air. The morning was cool, the sky a pale gray, the grass still damp with dew. He thought of sending them away quickly, before he grew weaker, before their presence dug into his silence. But then he saw them through the window, thin arms clutching each other, faces lined with despair. They had no weapons, no strength, nothing but broken lives. He clenched his jaw, hating the war that had made people like this, hating the fact that he could not just ignore it. He finally muttered, "One more night. No longer." The leader bowed deeply, whispering thanks. The others followed, bowing too, though their eyes shone with relief. They began moving carefully, cleaning the little space they had used, sweeping the floor with their hands, trying to show gratitude. It was strange to him. For years, no one had set foot in his house except himself. Now these women, who once might have been his enemies, were scrubbing his floor and washing his old dishes. As the day passed, he listened quietly to their story. Piece by piece, the truth unfolded. Their colony had been attacked by raiders, the kind who hunted the weak and took what they wanted. Their husbands, soldiers and workers, had fought but were all killed. The women and their children had fled, but along the way, many children had perished. Some were taken, some starved, others froze in the cold nights. The ones who remained carried memories too heavy for their hearts. The human said nothing, but his chest grew heavier with every word. He had fought raiders before, long ago. He knew the cruelty of their kind. He also knew they never stopped hunting. If these widows had escaped, then raiders were surely searching for them even now. That night, when the widows tried to rest again, the human heard them whispering in their alien tongue. Some spoke of their children, some of their husbands, some of their shame. They said their own people had turned them away, calling them bad luck because they had survived while their families had not. He understood then, they were not only refugees, they were outcasts. He lay on his bed, staring at the wooden ceiling. His heart wrestled with itself. He had built this life for silence. He had wanted nothing more than to forget the galaxy, to bury the wars behind him. But now fate had delivered these women to his doorstep, and if he turned them out, they would surely die. The next morning, he found them outside, repairing a broken section of his fence. Their alien hands were clumsy with the human tools, but they worked hard. They were trying to repay him, to prove they were not only a burden. One of them, younger than the rest, brought him water without being asked. Another set bread on the table she had baked with his supplies. Their small acts made the ranch feel different. It no longer felt like a tomb of silence, but like a place where life still fought to survive. But the human's sharp eyes caught something else that day. Out on the distant hills, faint trails of smoke rose into the sky. He knew the signs: raiders moving, searching, burning small camps as they tracked their prey. His jaw tightened. Trouble was coming closer. That evening, as the sun fell behind the horizon, he stood on his porch and watched the widows inside. Some were cooking, some mending clothes, some sitting together in silence, their faces tired but calmer than before. He felt the strangest sensation. For years, his house had been nothing but wood, stone, and emptiness. Now it felt alive, even though it was filled with people who carried sorrow. One widow noticed him standing there and approached quietly. She bowed her head, speaking softly. "You saved us," she said. "Even if only for 2 nights, you gave us what no one else would." He wanted to tell her he had not saved them, that he had only delayed the inevitable. But the words would not leave his throat. He only nodded once, his eyes hard as he looked toward the dark hills where smoke still rose. In his heart, he knew the truth. Silence was gone. Danger was coming. And no matter how much he wanted to keep the world away, the world had found him again. The night fell heavy over the ranch. The human sat on the porch, his old rifle resting across his lap. His eyes searched the dark hills, and his ears listened for every sound. The widows were inside, some whispering, some asleep, but none of them truly at peace. They could feel the same thing he felt. Danger was near. The silence of the land was broken only by the crackling of his fire. But then, from far beyond the fields, faint lights began to flicker. Moving lights. Not stars. Torches, lanterns, machines. Raiders. The human stood, his bones aching, but his movements sharp like a soldier again. He pushed open the door, his voice low but steady. "Stay inside. Do not move." The widows froze, fear spreading across their faces. They understood even without his explanation. The hunters had found them. Moments later, shadows appeared at the edge of his land. Figures, armed and loud, stepping into view. They were not soldiers. They were raiders, wild men and aliens, dressed in scavenged armor, carrying blades, rifles, and cruel smiles. Their leader stepped forward, a tall alien with jagged scars down his face. His voice boomed through the night. "Old man, we know what you hide inside. Hand them over. 11 widows. They belong to us." The human did not answer at first. He only lifted his rifle slowly, the barrel shining faintly in the firelight. His stance was steady, his finger firm on the trigger. Finally, he spoke. "Step closer, and you won't walk back." His voice was calm, like stone, but filled with a warning that could not be ignored. The raiders laughed, their voices carrying through the night. One of them shouted, "You think you can fight us, old human? Your time is finished." The leader grinned, showing sharp teeth. "We'll burn your ranch. We'll take what we came for." But before he could take another step, the human pulled the trigger. The sound thundered through the night, sharp and deadly. A bullet tore into the dirt just inches from the leader's feet, sending dust flying. The laughter stopped. Silence fell across the group. The old human had not aimed to kill. Not yet. He had fired a warning, but his aim had been perfect. Every raider there now knew he was not bluffing. The leader's eyes narrowed. He stared at the human, measuring him. This was no weak old farmer. This was a man who had fought wars, who still carried the hands of a killer. The raiders shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Some wanted to rush forward, but the leader raised his hand to stop them. Inside the house, the widows held their breaths. They clung to each other, listening to the standoff outside. Some prayed in their alien tongue. Others silently wept. None of them had ever seen a human stand against raiders before. The leader spat on the ground, his voice bitter. "You've bought yourself a little time, old man, but you can't stop us forever. We'll be back, and when we come, you'll wish you had handed them over." With that, he turned and waved his hand. Slowly, the raiders stepped back, melting into the darkness from which they had come. Their laughter returned, cruel and mocking, echoing as they disappeared into the night. The human lowered his rifle only after the last shadow was gone. His chest rose and fell slowly. He knew the raiders were not finished. They would return, stronger and angrier. Tonight was only the beginning. He walked back inside. The widows rushed to him, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. One of them whispered, "You faced them, alone." Another said, "They will return. You should not fight for us." Their leader stepped forward, her voice low but filled with sorrow. "We are not worth your death, human. We brought this danger to you." He looked at them, his face hard, his eyes like steel. "If I wanted you gone, you would not be here." But hear me well. Those men will come back. When they do, you will listen to me, or we will all die." The widows nodded, though fear still gripped them. They saw him now not just as an old farmer, but as a warrior who had once faced death and survived. For the first time, a spark of hope flickered in their hearts. That night, the human did not sleep. He sat by the window, rifle in hand, staring out at the hills. His mind went back to the wars he had tried so hard to forget. The way comrades had fallen beside him. The way he had promised never to fight again. Yet here he was, standing on the edge of another battle. He wondered if fate had brought these women to him, not to destroy his silence, but to give him one last fight to win. The widows slept uneasily, but some of them, in the quiet of their dreams, saw him as more than a stranger. They saw him as their shield. They knew the raiders would not stop. But they also knew the human would not abandon them. Outside, the night stretched on, silent once again, but it was no longer the silence of peace. It was the silence before the storm. The human kept his eyes open, waiting, knowing the fight for his ranch and for the widows had only just begun. The morning sun rose over the ranch, but the peace it brought felt thin, like a sheet of paper ready to tear. The widows moved carefully around the house, their eyes still filled with fear after the raid in the night. They had seen the human stand alone against the raiders, his rifle steady, his voice strong. To them, he was no longer just an old man who had given them a roof for 2 nights. He was something more, though none dared to say it aloud. The human, however, felt different. He did not want their eyes on him, full of gratitude and hope. He had spent years trying to forget wars, yet in a single night, he had become a soldier again. Still, as he walked through the house, he noticed things had changed. The widows were not only sitting in sorrow anymore, they had begun to move with purpose. 2 of them cleaned the kitchen, one mended a broken chair, and others swept the dusty floor. Their voices, soft and careful, filled the air where silence had once ruled. At first, he found it strange, even uncomfortable. His ranch had always been quiet. He had chosen this place because no one would disturb him. Now, everywhere he turned, there were whispers, laughter, and the sound of work. But as the day went on, he realized something he hadn't felt in years. The ranch was alive. He watched them from the porch as they worked outside, repairing parts of the fence with clumsy hands. They were not skilled with human tools, but they tried. Their alien fingers fumbled with nails and hammers, yet they refused to stop. The human shook his head, finally stepping in. Without a word, he took the hammer from one of them and showed her how to hold it properly, how to strike with control. She looked at him with wide eyes, and when she managed to fix a plank correctly, her face lit up with a smile. It was the first time he had seen her smile since they arrived. At mealtime, the widows surprised him. They had used his supplies, flour, beans, and dried herbs to cook a meal. The scent filled the air, rich and warm. He sat at the table silently while they placed bowls before him. They ate together in quiet at first, but slowly the widows began to talk among themselves. Their voices carried stories, small memories of the colony they had lost, of the children who had once run through their streets, of the lives they would never see again. The human listened without joining in, but he felt the weight of their words. They had carried so much pain, and yet here they were, trying to live again. Later that night, as the fire crackled, one of the younger widows approached him. Her hands trembled as she clutched a broken wooden toy she had found among his old things. "Did you have children?" she asked softly. He looked at the toy, remembering a past he had buried deep. He gave no answer, only took the toy from her hands and set it on the shelf. But her question lingered long after she had gone. Days passed. The widows stayed, though he reminded them often that it was only temporary. They did not argue. Instead, they filled his ranch with small changes. They washed his old clothes, repaired broken tools, even planted small herbs near the back wall. The house, once cold and empty, now carried warmth. He told himself he did not need it, that he preferred silence. But when he walked through the rooms at night and heard soft voices or quiet breathing, he realized he no longer felt alone. Still, he remained cautious. He knew the raiders would return. Every night, he checked his rifle, sharpened his knife, and scanned the hills. The widows noticed, but none of them spoke of it. They trusted him, even though he had never asked for their trust. One evening, as the sun burned red across the horizon, he sat by the porch cleaning his rifle. The leader of the widows came and stood beside him. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she said, "You live in silence, but silence does not keep the world away. You know this now." He looked at her, his eyes sharp. "I didn't ask for this." Her gaze did not waver. "We did not ask for it either, but here we are. Maybe it was meant." Her words settled in his chest like a stone. He wanted to argue, but deep down he knew she was right. Fate had placed them at his gate, and he had let them in. His silence was already broken. That night, as the widows settled to sleep, one of them whispered to another, but he overheard it. "Maybe the human was sent to save us." The words made him stiffen. He did not want to be anyone's savior. Yet, as he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, he realized something had shifted inside him. For years, he had been nothing but a shadow of a soldier, a ghost living in silence. But now, he felt a reason to stand again, a reason to fight. The ranch no longer felt like his alone. It had become something else, something larger. A fragile family had begun to form, though none of them said it aloud. And in his heart, though he tried to deny it, he felt the truth. He could not send them away anymore. But danger was still out there. He had seen the smoke, heard the threats, and he knew the raiders would return. And when they did, the silence he had once loved would be replaced with fire, blood, and the test of whether he could still protect what had become his home. The days passed slowly, but the human could feel it in his bones. The raiders would come back. Every morning he scanned the hills with sharp eyes, and every night he polished his rifle by the fire. The widows noticed his restlessness, and though they tried to live like normal, cooking, repairing, cleaning, they too felt the shadow growing closer. Fear lived in their hearts, but so did something else. Hope. They believed the human would protect them again, though none dared to say it aloud. That evening, the signs finally appeared. A trail of dust in the distance, the sound of engines and shouting voices carried by the wind. The human's face hardened. He stepped onto the porch, the rifle already in his hands. "They're coming," he said in a voice that allowed no doubt. The widows froze. Panic spread quickly. Some clutched each other. Others cried out in their alien tongue. Their leader stood firm, but her eyes were full of dread. The human raised his hand, silencing them. "Listen to me. If you want to live, you will do exactly as I say." His voice was sharp, commanding, the same voice he had once used on battlefields. The widows nodded quickly, even through their fear. They had no one else to guide them. He moved fast, showing them what to do. He pushed furniture against doors, blocked windows with heavy wood, and handed out tools to use as weapons. Shovels, axes, even sharpened sticks. "Stay low. Stay quiet. Don't open the door unless I say so." His orders were clear, and though the widow's hands shook, they obeyed. The sound grew louder. Engines roared closer, and then came the laughter of raiders, cruel and eager. They surrounded the ranch like wolves circling prey. Their leader shouted, "Old man, we warned you. Hand them over, and maybe we let you live." The human stepped forward, standing tall at the gate. His rifle gleamed in the torchlight. "If you want them," he said, "come and take them." The first raider rushed forward, his blade raised high. The crack of the rifle split the night. The raider fell before his body even hit the ground. The others stopped in shock. Then, with a roar, they attacked. The human fought like a man who had never forgotten war. His rifle fired again and again, each shot precise, each target struck down before they reached the house. When his bullets ran low, he pulled out his knife, moving with the deadly speed of experience. His old body ached, but his will was iron. He would not let them through. Inside, the widows huddled together, but then one of them, trembling yet determined, grabbed a heavy stick. She whispered to the others, "We cannot just hide. He fights for us. We must fight too." Fear clashed with courage in their eyes, but slowly they rose. One by one, they armed themselves with the tools he had given them. When a raider smashed through a window, the widows screamed but did not flee. They struck together, beating him down with everything they had. Another tried to break through the door, but two widows shoved the furniture harder, blocking him out. For the first time, they were not just widows. They were defenders. The human noticed through the chaos. His rifle barked again, dropping another raider, and he shouted back toward the house, "Good! Don't give them an inch!" His voice carried strength, and the widows felt it fill their hearts. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Raiders fell, one after another, but they kept coming. The ranch echoed with gunfire, screams, and the clash of steel. Smoke and dust filled the air. The human's arms grew heavy, his breath rough, but he refused to fall. Every raider he killed reminded him of the comrades he had lost, of why he had sworn never to fight again. Yet here he was, not for war, not for glory, but for something simple: life, family, the fragile chance of peace these widows carried. At last, the raiders began to break. Their leader, furious and bleeding from a cut across his arm, shouted for retreat. "This isn't over, old man. We'll return, and next time we'll burn you alive." His voice vanished into the night as the survivors fled, dragging their wounded with them. The ranch fell silent again, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence after battle, heavy and raw. The human leaned against the porch rail, sweat dripping from his brow, his rifle nearly empty. His body ached, every muscle screaming, but he still stood. Inside, the widows stepped out carefully, their eyes wide, their faces pale but shining with something new: pride. They had fought back. They had survived. One of them whispered, "We did it. We stood with him." Another dropped to her knees, tears flowing freely. "You saved us again," she said, looking at the human as if he were more than flesh and bone, as if he were something unshakable. The leader walked up to him slowly. She studied his face, the scars, the exhaustion in his eyes. "You are not just a soldier," she said softly. "You are a shield." He shook his head, wiping blood from his hands. "No, I'm just a man who wanted silence." His voice was rough, but his eyes betrayed him. Deep inside, he felt something stir. He had lived alone for so long, believing he was finished, believing his story had ended. But now he stood surrounded by life, by people who looked to him, depended on him. The widows gathered close, some bowing their heads, others clutching his arms as if afraid he would vanish. For them, he was no longer just a stranger who had opened his door. He was the one who had made them believe they could live again. The human looked out at the dark hills where the raiders had disappeared. He knew they would come back, stronger and angrier. The fight was not finished. But as he glanced at the widows standing together with fire in their eyes, he realized he was no longer standing alone. The ranch carried the smell of smoke and blood after the fight. Broken wood lay scattered near the fence, bullet shells glinted in the dirt, and dark stains marked the ground where raiders had fallen. The widows moved silently through the wreckage, cleaning, repairing, and tending to small wounds they had suffered. Their faces were tired, but their eyes were different now. No longer filled only with fear, they carried strength. They had fought back, and they had survived. The human sat on the porch, sharpening his knife, his rifle resting against the wall. His body ached from the battle, but he stayed quiet. His mind replayed the fight again and again, reminding him of the wars he had once lived through. He had promised himself never to fight again, but now, here he was, drawn into a war for people he had not even known 2 weeks ago. Yet as he looked at the widows working, he felt something unfamiliar: pride. That evening, when the sky turned red with sunset, the widows gathered near him. Their leader stepped forward. She bowed her head, her voice steady but full of emotion. "We cannot leave. Not now. You gave us more than a roof. You gave us a reason to live again. This ranch, it is home." The human's jaw tightened. He had been waiting for this. He wanted to refuse, to remind them that he had chosen this land for silence, that he wanted no one, no responsibility. But when he looked at them, 11 widows, scarred but unbroken, his words caught in his throat. They were no longer strangers. They had worked his land, defended his house, and stood by him when death came knocking. "You don't understand," he finally said, his voice rough. "If you stay, the raiders will return. They will come harder, stronger, and this time they may kill us all." One of the younger widows stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "Then let them come. We would rather die here, fighting beside you, than run again." Her eyes burned with determination, and the others nodded, standing behind her. The human looked at them one by one. Each face told a story of pain, of loss, but also of resolve. They had nothing left in the galaxy. No homes, no families, no future, except here. And for the first time in many years, he realized he too had nothing left except this. Still, he hesitated. He was tired, so tired of battles. "I am an old man," he muttered. "I wanted silence, not war." The leader's voice softened. Silence is death, human. Life is noisy. Life is voices around a fire, hands working together, hearts beating together. You may not have wanted us, but you need us. And we need you. Her words pierced him deeper than any blade could. He looked away, staring at the horizon where the hills burned faintly with the memory of raiders' fires. For years he had believed he was done. But maybe fate had kept him alive for this moment, for these people. That night, the widows sat with him around the fire. They cooked, they sang in their alien tongue, a soft song of sorrow and hope. The human listened, his heart heavy but strangely warm. He realized he could not send them away anymore. They were part of his life now, whether he liked it or not. Later, when most had gone to sleep, the leader remained awake. She sat across from him, her eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. After a long silence, she spoke. "We call you protector, but you do not see yourself as one. Tell me, human, why do you fight if you hate it so much?" He stared into the flames. Memories of war filled his mind. Battles, friends lost, victories that felt like defeats. "Because someone had to," he said at last. "Because if I didn't, others would die." His voice grew lower. "And because I could never walk away." The leader nodded slowly. "Then you are exactly who we need." Her words left him unsettled, but he did not argue. Deep inside, he knew she was right. The next days were spent preparing. The widows worked harder than ever, gathering supplies, repairing walls, and learning from him. He taught them how to use knives properly, how to spot movement in the hills, how to set traps. They were clumsy at first, but their determination was unshakable. Every mistake was corrected, every small success celebrated. The ranch slowly transformed from a quiet refuge into a place ready for war. At times, he caught himself watching them, noticing how their fear had turned to courage. They no longer looked like broken women. They looked like survivors who had chosen to fight. And he, who once wanted silence more than anything, now stood among them, teaching, guiding, protecting. One night, when the stars glittered cold in the sky, the leader approached him again. This time, her voice was different, gentler, almost fragile. "We are 11 widows," she whispered. "We lost everything, but together, with you, we are more. We can be a family." The human's heart clenched. A family. The word felt heavy, dangerous. He had buried that idea long ago, buried it with his wife and child who had died during the wars. He wanted to reject it, to push it away. But as he looked at the widows sleeping around the fire, their faces soft, their breath steady, he realized the truth. They had already become his family. He did not speak, only nodded once, but that small nod meant everything. The next morning, as the first light touched the land, the human stood on the porch. His rifle was ready, his knife sharpened, his heart no longer empty. He knew the raiders would come again. He knew it would be harder this time. But he also knew he would not face it alone. The silence he had once loved was gone. In its place stood something louder, stronger, voices, footsteps, laughter, hope. And for the first time in many years, the human accepted it. The widows were his responsibility now, his family. But in the distance, the hills seemed darker than before. Trouble was gathering, closer and closer. The final battle was coming, and he would have to decide how far he was willing to go to protect the life he never asked for, but could no longer live without. The night came heavy with tension. The widows sat close together inside the house, their hands shaking as they prepared the tools and weapons the human had given them. Outside, he stood on the porch, staring into the dark hills. His rifle was loaded, his knife sharp, and his old heart beat like a drum. He could feel it in his bones. The raiders were near. They would not stop until they took the widows, and this time they were coming with everything they had. The sound arrived first. Engines growled like monsters in the distance. Then came the flicker of torches, dozens of them, glowing across the hills like angry stars. The ground shook under the weight of their machines and boots. The widows gasped when they heard it, some clutching each other in fear. But the human did not move. He stood tall, his shadow long against the firelight. For the first time in years, he was not just an old man on a ranch. He was a soldier again. The raiders came into view, dozens of them, maybe more. Their leader, scar-faced and furious, shouted over the noise. "Old man, you should have handed them over when you had the chance. Tonight you die, and your ranch burns with you." His men roared, raising weapons high. The human lifted his rifle and spoke, his voice carrying across the land. "If you want them, you'll have to step over my body. and I promise you, many of you will fall before that happens. The raiders surged forward, and the battle began. Gunfire cracked through the night, bullets tearing into the dirt and walls. The human fired shot after shot, each bullet finding its mark. Raiders dropped one by one, their bodies tumbling in the dust. Still, more charged. The widows screamed inside, but then, just as before, courage rose in their hearts. They blocked the doors, reinforced the windows, and prepared to fight. A raider broke through a side window, but 3 widows struck him down with axes and sticks. Another tried to climb the roof, but was pushed off by 2 more. The house was alive with resistance. They were no longer helpless victims. They were warriors, standing for their home. The human fought like a man possessed. His rifle emptied, he switched to his knife, moving with deadly precision. His age showed in his heavy breathing, in the sweat pouring down his face, but his spirit burned brighter than any torch. Every swing, every strike carried the weight of years of battle. The raiders pressed harder. Explosions shook the ground as they tried to break the walls. The leader roared, charging straight for the porch with a blade in hand. The human met him head-on. The clash was brutal. The leader was younger, stronger, but the human was sharper, faster, and carried a fire the raider did not understand. They fought fiercely, knife against blade, fists against fists, until at last the human drove his knife deep into the leader's chest. The raider staggered back, eyes wide with shock, before collapsing into the dirt. Seeing their leader fall, the rest of the raiders faltered. Their shouts grew weaker, their movements uncertain. The widows, emboldened, struck harder from inside the house. The human stood tall on the porch, bloodied but unbroken, his rifle raised high though nearly empty. His voice thundered across the field. "Leave now, or none of you will see another dawn." Fear spread through the raiders like fire in dry grass. One by one, they began to retreat, dragging their wounded and leaving their dead behind. Soon the sound of engines faded into the night, their torches vanishing into the hills. Silence returned at last, but this time it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence after victory. The human dropped to his knees, his chest heaving, his body trembling from exhaustion. That he thought he might collapse there and never rise again. But then, footsteps rushed toward him. The widows poured out of the house, their faces streaked with tears, their voices filled with relief. They surrounded him, lifting him up with their hands, refusing to let him fall. "You saved us," one whispered, pressing her forehead to his arm. "You gave us life again," another said. The leader looked at him with shining eyes. "You stood alone, and we stood with you. This ranch is no longer just yours. It is ours, together." The human closed his eyes, feeling their hands holding him steady. For so long, he had lived with nothing but silence. For so long, he had believed he was finished. But now, he was not alone. He had found something greater than peace. He had found a family. In the days that followed, the widows rebuilt the ranch with him. They repaired the broken walls, planted fresh crops, and turned the place into something more than a hiding spot. It became a home. Their laughter echoed across the fields, their voices filled the rooms, and for the first time in years, the ranch was alive with joy. The human still carried his rifle, still sharpened his knife, for he knew danger was never truly gone. But he no longer fought for himself. He fought for them, for the 11 widows who had come to his gate one night, desperate and broken, and who had changed his life forever. The silence he had once wanted so badly was gone, replaced by the sound of living hearts, of family, of love. And as he sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the hills, he allowed himself the smallest of smiles. He had not wanted this life, but now he could not imagine living without it.